Give thanks.
I was going to see something came up on the screen, but which was all was well. That was the first chant. And now this is a tribute to the ancestors, and then we have a final chant. The tribute to the ancestors was written while in Guyana for the celebration of Emancipation Day. We were invited by the president to be there as special guests, President and Session of the Nyahbinghi Order. And while on stage, the president, the opposition from the Indian party, they came and they were all on stage, you know, over 40,000 Guyanese. It was all live on Guyana radio and television. And we did this tribute, and we had all 40,000 Guyanese shouting for freedom. So we do this one in honor of our ancestors. To our ancestors who suffered over 400 years of slavery and fought the colonizers with such bravery, to them we say, freedom! To over 100 million Africans who died in barbaric conditions in the holds of ships, and to those who endure severe hardships, to them we say, freedom! To the Africans who jumped into the sea and rather to die than to go in slavery, to them we say, freedom! To the Indians who came and worked for a small price and found that slavery was not nice, to them we say, freedom! To those who fought with valor and skill and chattel slavery they did kill, to them we say, freedom! Women like Nanny of the Maroons from J.A. and Queen Mary of St. Thomas did lead the way. To them we say, freedom! To Nzinga, Harriet Tubman, and Sojourner Truth, and all our women who left a legacy for our youths, to them we say, freedom! We say thanks to Accra, Damien, and Kofi, who led the revolution on the River Conji. The year it was 1793, they won this victory for you and for me. To them we say, freedom! To our Asian family who put an end to French rule and let them know we are not their tool. To them we say, freedom! A tribute to our ancestors. Here we are. We do give thanks for this victorious day, and as we celebrate globally this special day when our ancestors were freed from the yoke of chattel slavery, we look forward for greater emancipation of our minds. As God will say, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. There's a lot more work to be done, because today we still see Black people bleaching their skin. We still see them straightening their hair, not loving the texture of it. We still see them bowing to a blonde or blue-eyed image of a Messiah that is unknown to us and is unknown in history. So we look forward for a greater emancipation. We look forward for the compensation that is due to us as African people, because the planters received 20 million pounds sterling, and we left the plantation only with a hoe, a pickaxe, and these tools of our slavery. So we look forward to our reparation, and we also know that reparation comes with repatriation, the returning of I people to our ancestral homeland. And you know, as we celebrate Emancipation Day today, we want to just pay homage to the elder patriarchs who has gone to the ancestors over there in South Africa. We heard of Bongo George being interned yesterday, And we sadly hear of Bongo Wakai in no short order. He just left the day when Bongo George made his exit to Mother Earth. So we pay homage to all the patriots and matriarchs of Rastafari, those of our African brothers and sisters who endured severe hardship on the plantations. And we look forward to that day when I and I met. So we give thanks. Love and blessings, Rastafari. Highly high. Selassie
Give thanks, Honorable Ras Ivy and family, Sister Ibi and the rest of the family, the grandchildren. We really give thanks for those opening eyes and particularly for the creative talents that came together in framing this conversation in that wonderful poem, which seemed almost like a roll call for I and I on this morning, in this particular occasion where people are gathered globally for this purposeful day. In fact, Rastafari has been on this battlefield, maintaining Emancipation Day as an important signifier for us. In fact, it is due to Rastafari why this day has returned to the Jamaican calendar. So we really give thanks for ones like Ras Ibai Tafari. He's been completely supportive of this university that we have created virtually, and we see him and his scholarship and his family as important parts of our work. On the subject of emancipation, I want to also recognize that not only does Ras Ivy work within the space of the priesthood, but he has also been one of the major architects of the liberation through the construction of chants that are relevant, originating from Rastafari, and not necessarily the same old Judeo-Christian hymns that we conventionally just tweak and say that they are now ours. So I want to really salute and celebrate how it is that the work being done by ones like Ras Ibai helps in this purposeful emancipation, the mental uh, liberation that we're seeking collectively. My name is Jalani Naya. I'm with you once more to facilitate the conversation we're having this morning. Our intention really is through the purpose of the Nyahbinghi, to really focus on emancipation as an objective among I and I. We know that Rastafari is squarely um, intent on this as a theme. It's one of our major pillars of understanding. So we could not allow for today to pass and not duly recognize that day in this way. We've organized a framework that has individuals like Ras Frankai, who is well known across our community, um, Ras Bosco, who is not so well known in the Jamaican space, but is also known, Ras Hayavi, one of our elders in the community. Um, Sister Ify, I'm hoping will join us, Ras Ironton. It's really a fairly loosely ordered panel, really drawing on the individuals here to really help us to express and purposefully move forward with agendas that could help to build students, workers, faculty, I in general, in ways that are important for forward motion. I thank you again for taking time so early in the morning when you could have been doing other things on this mission. I give thanks. I see Ras Hayavi has joined us as well as Ambassador Ras Frankai Francis. They're pinned in camera now, and we're going to be hearing from them in a little while. Just as a pretext, the issue of emancipation is one that is well known to us. It's a big, long word that most of us, literate, educated or not, are clear that it has something to do with African people. And it's been popularized by individuals like Bob Marley and Marcus Garvey and Rastafari in helping us to understand that it is an important framework for people, especially the post-colonial. Uh, the issue of reparation is how this emancipation discourse has really entered the modern space. Individuals, for a while, I and I in particular, have been trying to advance this conversation on reparation. Regionally, we have motivated not just our community, but our leaders to engage on this mission. There is now a CARICOM reparations mandate as well as national mandates. So if one were to look reflectively on the impact of Rastafari teachment, which is what I would describe this development around reparation as, we can say that without being political, without political parties, without the franchise of having people elect us, we have been able to politicize issues related to African repair. And we have also been able to get governmental, parliamentary decisions on this. There are many things that now stand in front of us. The reparations conversation has, in some instances, been hijacked and taken over by bureaucrats, many of whom don't even understand the meaning of the word reparation. In a sense, we can't become complacent because our agendas have been taken up by politicians. That's really the core idea that I want to share here. So moving forward, this conversation really seeks to understand how it is that I and I can pivot. That's one of the words that we're using a lot today. How we can strategize to not let go of these conversations that we have been so much a part of their development and their teaching itself. Ambassador Ras Frankai Francis is a well-known regional citizen. He's been one of those people who can genuinely say he's a Caribbean person. He's born in Antigua with parents that are, regional. He will tell you a little about that, and lived in several of the islands, Trinidad, Jamaica, Dominica. And for his life, he has really given himself to a certain kind of community activism and service. I think Jamaica transformed him, having studied at Mona in the early 70s. He left Jamaica differently from how he arrived. I don't know how his parents accepted that, but this was Rastafari revolution. And thankfully, Mona campus was able to capture some of the region's finest intellectuals by virtue of the impact of Rastafari at the time there. Ras Rankai is uniquely qualified in our community, trained in economics, trained in the UK as well as in the Caribbean, experienced as a teacher in the classroom across the region. In recent times, he has been appointed by his progressive government, the Gaston Brown Antiguan government, as our first Rastafari ambassador, non-resident Ethiopia. And by virtue of the fact that that appointment comes as a Commonwealth appointment from the Queen herself, all of us being a part of the Commonwealth, we see Ras Frankai as the ambassador at large for Rastafari, not just in Antigua, but wherever Rastafari is. And that's pretty much one of the reasons why he has joined us on this panel today, to really be able to share some of his visions and experience with us as to imperatives. He's a millennial in the sense that he's quite up to date with all of the technology. He's on all the WhatsApp groups. He's on all social media. He is sharing with me new artists consistently who he thinks I should be aware of. And it's a joy to have ones like him on the front line with us here, and we give thanks for him taking time to join us. Ras Aya V is who I'd like to consider the first appointee. According to Peter Tosh, we needed a minister of ganja. Unwittingly, Ras Hayavi has been this for us. He comes from the history of the informal sector, being a pioneer in all of the efforts necessary to keep us regionally using, sharing, trading this sacrament long before we even thought that it was imaginable that there would be a legal framework. Um, he is a Rastafari who goes into his pocket to move this work. That's something that we genuinely appreciate, love, and respect. He, in fact, is part of the future that I and I are determined to create. He created the first collaborative event on ganja, cannabis, with one of the major global players, High Times. When Jamaica decriminalized ganja in 2015, Ras Hayavi was insightful in being able to show us that we could partner with the best and it could be within our terms. And his experience with that, he will share some of that with us at some point in time. But formally, the government recognized his investment and he was appointed to the Cannabis Licensing Authority. I would say as a consultant, and I hope he was well paid, even though I know he wasn't. But had it not been for him, the initial steps made in Jamaica in the decriminalization of ganja would by no means have gone as intelligently, if we can call it that, as it did. He was the caveat that saved the day. And in general, we're talking about two individuals with a similar uh, impact on their governments. Both Frankai and Hayavi have been consultants in helping Rastafari to pivot, to progress, and to advance. So this morning, it's really intended to have these regional rebels, if I may, these honor rebels, help us to understand the imperatives of emancipation for I and I, the things that we will not be given, that we will have to take, and the things that we will need to be clear about moving forward. As you can hear, my background is dynamic, so I'm trying to get off mic as quickly as possible. I hope the blender isn't disturbing you. Sunday lunch means that red peas, rice and peas with coconut milk has to be done. So those are some of the preparations you're hearing. But I'd like to first start with our ambassador, Ras Frankai Francis, for him just to reflect a little on his own journey to Rastafari and his current impressions on the movement and some of its urgencies. He is my beloved big brother, and I welcome him for taking time to join us. I know he's under a lot of pressures of the states. The government is on I's shoulder, and he's paused. So, my brother, give thanks for the coming forward, and we welcome you to share some of your wise mind with us. Aye. We're not hearing you yet, Ras Franca. I know that you seem to have unpinned. Welcome, Sister Ify. I see you're in camera. Give thanks for passing through. We're not hearing you, Ras Franca. We are now hearing you. Yes.
Yes. Giving thanks, Rajjalani. Giving thanks to the Almighty I. Giving thanks to His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I. and Her Royal Highness Empress Menen Asfa.
We're not hearing. We're not hearing. After Menin Asfa.
Wow.
We're
I
now
think that
hearing.
might be okay. Maybe yeah. Okay.
Sometimes the headset
Yes.
is an issue when you connect and disconnect. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the slackness of the connection, the USB connection. Yes, I give thanks to be in the presence of brethren and sisters in the community, the family of Black Eye Primacy, the ones on the battlefield of establishing the Kingman of the Most High on earth as it is in Mount Zion. And I say, blessed greetings and salutations to all ones here as we pay homage to our ancient ancestors, those who have gone to the bosom of eternity and still watch over and guide I and I in this tradition of righteousness that I and I have embraced, Rastafari. Just to put myself in a certain context, as Bongo Jalani, Dr. Jalani, our noted scholar and intellect within the whole process of formalizing, stabilizing, and contextualizing Rastafari in these Armageddon times. I was born actually in St. Vincent, where my mother was from that island, St. Vincent. My father from Antigua and Barbuda. My early education was in Dominica and subsequently in Antigua and Barbuda before journeying to Barbados for my degree, reading at the University of the West Indies at that campus there. Later in Glasgow, Scotland, and then to Jamaica, where though enrolled primarily in the university, in the aspects of academia, it was to the University of Rastafari that I pertained during those turbulent 70s in Jamaica, you know, seated at the feet of some of the elder patriarchs and being in close association with ones such as Ras Bonaji's Bongo Watto, Pashanti, who was always with Mashanti on the campus there at Mona, passing through practically every week and so on, and Bongo Time and others. And it is through these ancients and along with these ancients that I was introduced firmly into Rastafari and specifically into the Rastafari Nyahbinghi theocracy order, which I see as the spiritual aspect of the nation of Rastafari. I perceive Rastafari as individual moving to community and thus expanding into nation. And a nation would have to have those three different aspects then of its organizational, if you might, political aspects, its spiritual aspects, and its mental aspects also too. And it is in this respect that Ras Jalani and the university and the Rastafari Studies Center and other aspects of the Rastafari thinking intellectual pursuits, such groups as IDOR, such other organs as the Africa Rastafari New Faculty of Understanding, and then the other different groups in Africa and in the diaspora generally who have been providing that connection with the various institutes, the various aspects of government and the organizations which have been, part of the whole process towards the decolonization that Rastafari represents. As we celebrate on this day emancipation, the emancipation so-called that was given in liberating or granting freedom to the enslaved Africans in the British Empire in 1834, and particularly Antigua and Barbuda, where there was no apprenticeship system, was where, so that emancipation as such came in 1834 as opposed to 1838 in many of the other countries who had gone through 4 years of that partial sort of freedom that was called apprenticeship. In a real sense, though, the emancipation of 1834 was a most incomplete, if not criminal aspect, so-called freedom. It amounted to setting the enslaved, the formerly enslaved, free in a turbulent seas without any motivation, without a paddle, setting our canoe into the seas, turbulent seas, without a paddle. In that sense, emancipation never really represented the freedom. And in fact, this is why we now concentrate on the aspects of moving towards true liberation, true freedom in its most realistic sense. Because even when, as in 1962, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, and then in 66 with Guyana and Barbados, and then later on into the 70s in many of the islands in the Eastern Caribbean, had achieved some form of independence, this independence also was really only a very partial one. And while most of those who became independent at that time in the 60s, 70s, were also set adrift, so-called from their previous colonial masters. And we realized then that they were done so again without even any provision of the ability to develop themselves. Even from that time in 1962, 1966, 1971, right up into the 80s, where this year Antigua and Barbuda will be celebrating 40 years as a so-called independent country, but yet still feeling the ravages of colonialism and the effects after slavery. Noteworthy, of course, which I might know, is that at emancipation in 1834, it was the slave owners and slave holders and the plantocrats who had been given a big payout for having the property taken from them, so-called. It indicates that I, as Africans enslaved here in the West, were still regarded as property. And it is this property which was repaid then in 20 million pounds to the former slave owners, a debt which represented a major part of the British economy, the British budget, and which was only really fully realized some 6 years ago in 2015, that it was eventually paid off. So in terms of saying that the effects of slavery, the effects of enslavement of Africans was something long ago, the effects of it are still definitely still with us. Because even after emancipation, the ravages of colonialism and neocolonialism still combined to keep us in a state of underdevelopment, as was pointed out by many of our thinkers in those 60s and 70s, particularly by Walter Rodney, who was assassinated some 30 or 40 years ago in his native Guyana, and who had brought the academic fraternities in Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean to realization of the importance of Rastafari. And it is this aspect that I would just like to mention here and to share, amongst our community, our brethren and sisters on the Zoom conference and meeting and Nyahbinghi celebration today, as we celebrate Emancipation Day, August the 1st, 1834, when it really came into effect. And we have seen in recent times, I think coming from 2007, which was the celebration or commemoration rather of the abolition of the slave trade, the trade in the transatlantic slave trade, trading of Africans and setting them into chattel slavery. And it was commemorated in 2007. That was 200 years after it had been officially abolished by the British government, by the British Parliament. And from since that, we have seen from 2013 and 2014, largely through the constant lobbying and activism of Rastafari, the establishment of a CARICOM, or a Caribbean Reparation Support Commission, which have produced a 10-point plan, which has been greatly influenced in a sense by Rastafari. And I must say that even in its formation in 2013, this Caribbean Reparations Commission in St. Vincent, where the Honorable Ras Bonnie Whaler had been one of the major contributors at that 2013 gathering in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Subsequent gatherings took place in 2014 in Antigua and Barbuda, and many of the islands, many of the nations have established their independent reparations commissions, committees, which have all gone together to formulate the CARICOM Reparations Commission. In many instances, as I think Ras Jelani alluded to, some of the reactions of Rastafari was that Babylon have taken over this agenda and are moving forward with it. And so it reflected, or was reflected by certain brethren and sisters, that, okay, let them go ahead with it. Because we found that the attitude from those who had formed the Caribbean Reparations Commission was very much a pat on the back to Rastafari. Well done, you've carried it so far, we're taking it over now. But I have been adamant that Rastafari must still keep in the forefront. And in this, I have been underlined by the thinking and the statements made by Dr. Julius Garvey, the son, of course, of the Honorable Prophet Marcus Messiah Garvey. Both here in 2014, when he was the featured speaker in Antigua and Barbuda at that regional gathering, and in 2018 at a conference in Guyana, commemorating and celebrating the International Decade for People of African Descent. He made the statement that the bandwagon that is, as we would say, Babylon is now coming on to, or the Caribbean community of reparations, is the Rastafari bandwagon, so to speak. It is something that was initiated by Rastafari, so that the Rastafari perspective in this context has to be taken into account. And since that, while there have been many Rastafari brethren and sisters on the various committees in the various islands, the CARICOM Reparations Commission has recently, in about 3 or 4 months ago, reached out to include a permanent Rastafari representative on the CARICOM Reparations Commission. And so it is in this sense that I certainly are in the process of contextualizing Rastafari and our perspective on this reparations. And we have, by our lobbying and our activism, insisted that repatriation be a part of the agenda in seeking, and activism in seeking for reparations. But even in that context, it is still necessary for us to understand, appreciate, and to put our perspective as how we see reparations. Because it is not only a return to the land of our ancient ancestors, but to my mind, it is a return to the African ways of thinking in terms of diet, in terms of medicine, and in terms of liberty generally, that I and I have to see this repatriation. Returning to Africa, yes, but returning to the ancient ways of our African ancestors in rejecting the westernized idea of medicine, for example, as a treatment mechanism or protocol, and looking into it more as a preventative sense and the use of the natural aspects of the earth. And that sense then of repair has to be a part of the conceptualization of repatriation, has to be an aspect of our repatriation and of our reparations, the idea of repair. Because as we heard our noble Nyahbinghi priest, Ras Ivai, just pointing out that the whole question of mental slavery still is deeply seated in the thinking of many of those in the Caribbean generally, or in the African diaspora. There's so many of the Africans in the diaspora that still proclaim men are African, and are still involved in the whole question of bleaching and of thinking in terms of the colonialist, white supremacist narrative which has bestowed upon us. And when we hear such as the actor Morgan Freeman, for example, suggesting that he did not think or he does not believe that Africans had to be dragged onto these slave ships to be transported. He saw it more as Africans rushing to get on these slave ships to escape Africa. And when we can see from someone as a prominent African American, a prominent actor, one that a number of Africans in the diaspora have some respect for, when we can hear him chanting these sort of European narratives, really, and a total misunderstanding of the whole question of chattel slavery and what it meant in the destruction of African societies and in the keeping down of Africans who were enslaved in the Americas and in the Caribbean, we can understand the extent of our need to educate and to move from the miseducation that has been instilled on us by the European hegemony, the white supremacist narrative that was the whole slavery and colonial enterprise and project that we still have to loose ourselves from. And that is a desperate and definitely very much adequate time for us to be pressing this aspect of repair. Let me just say too, and not wanting to be taking too much of the time, and knowing that a number of our other brethren and sisters will also be making their contributions here, that the whole question of reparations has to be on the agenda, yes, but the Rastafari perspective on it has to be the underlying feature. And I think that this is the stage that we are at too. And in talking of stages, in terms of world cosmology as it moves now, we are seeing the COVID restrictions and the whole COVID areas, we are seeing in the definite arrival of the prophecies of Rastafari from such a time. What we are seeing now is what we have predicted, is what Rastafari, I and I, have predicted from time immemorial. The day the dollar died, the day that everyone was under lockdown, the day when the whole world really was under a sort of protocol determined not by sufferer peoples, but by the authorities out there now. So it is a time for us not to be amazed, not to panic, as the chant says, no need to cry, Ethiopians, for the Lion of Judah has prevailed to break the bonds, to break the chains, and to set the captives free. There's no need to cry. It is for us to now come to the realization that what we have predicted, what we have prophesied, has come to pass. And we must now provide the ark that will take us through these Armageddon times. We must now, having been visionary enough to sight that it was going to happen, to continue in this preparation. And that preparation entails the formation of our strong Rastafari communities based on a spiritual, material, and a physical, material, and a mental aspects in the formation of these strong pillars of our Rastafari nation, strong communities or communities which go together to formulate the Rastafari nation, the kingman of righteousness, the kingdom of righteousness, his kingdom on earth as it is in Mount Zion. So just again to put context to myself and to Rastafari, that the whole force, power of Rastafari has moved very much in the area of Mount Africa, of Africa itself, as we establish more and more the connectivities with the organs on the continent itself. In that respect, Ras Frankai Emolimu Kwame Tafari, to give my Rastafari name then, has been installed in the Royal Mpese Chieftaincy in the Ga traditional areas in Africa, in Ghana particularly. I am installed with the installed name Ni Tafarai Aye Osabu Mpese the First. Aye Osabu Mpese the First. Ni being the appellation of chief or king. Mpese now is a dreadlocks entity within the Ga traditional royal chieftaincy. And there, a paramount chief, one of the first dreadlocks to be installed within the chieftaincy of the Ga traditional, has been Osabu Congo Mpese the First. Ni Osabu Mpese Congo the First. And it is as such that I address ones-on-ones, sharing these little thoughts or these few thoughts with ones, as we encourage for us to look towards repatriation, towards not only returning to the land of our ancestors, but fully returning to our African traditions, our African ways of life, etc., in moving forward to the realization of his kingman on earth as it is in Mount Zion. And just to say on the CRO, the Caribbean Rastafari Organization, I and I have been established since 1998, a registered entity, and within that context have been able to associate with and be presenting a Rastafari representation in many areas. At the AU CARICOM meetings that progressed since 2005 and are all looking to be regenerated, I and I as CRO have been part and parcel of that. I and I were also represented at the World Conference Against Racism in 2001. I and I have also had representation on the Caribbean Pan-African Network, CPAN, which of course is the connectivity and connection also to the African Union. And while we acknowledge our ancients and those who have gone on to be with our ancestors. Let me also mention Ras Ira al-Jabari, who was, of course, our representative at that World Conference Against Racism and had been very active within CPAN also, the Caribbean Pan-African Network, and in other areas dealing with repatriation. And of course, Empress Ijanya also too, who is a relative of, or was a relative of Atlee Rogers, the author of The Holy Pibi, published in South Africa in 1923, which declared the divinity of Rastafari as he was at that time in 1923, and founded the Atlean congregation in Kimberley, South Africa, Atlee Rogers, one of the early pronouncers and announcers of the faith of Rastafari. And Sister Ijanya also has produced a document some years ago, which I and I are now looking to reactivate, pertaining to Rastafari representative or representation within the African Union, particularly as a permanent feature on what is known as ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council within the African Union. So just pointing out then some of the things that are currently underway in the Rastafari immunity, the Rastafari nation really, and the aspects of our thinking on it provided by such of our thinkers and writers as Ras Jalani and institutions such as IDOR, such as the Africa Rastafari New Faculty of Interpretation or Overstanding, and the other groupings, the Rastafari Continental Council on the continent, in Africa itself, and the other institutions therein, which have been providing that area of representation for Rastafari. Blessed love again, community, nation, and those of the family of righteousness of Black Supremacy. Hail up Rasaya V. Hail up Sister Ifia, whose father, we still hold so dearly in memory. Irie Irons, such a loving soul contributor within the whole process and progress of Rastafari. And to all other ones on the Zoom link today, let us say, hail up, blessings, and always remembrances of our ancestors and of that glorious divine union of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I and Empress Menen. Let all be praised. Jah Rastafari. Give Him thanks.
Give thanks, Honorable Ambassador Ras Frankai Francis, for that magisterial account of the history of today and I investment in that work. You've managed to not just survey the history, but to bring us fully up to speed with the actions and strategies that I have embraced to move our mission forward in a decisive way. We give thanks. I know you're pressed with a lot of other obligations and you didn't prepare a script, but you provided us with the perfect context to open up this conversation. I want to invite Ras Ayavi to 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 similarly provide his own take from his location here in Jamaica and the work that he sees as our imperative right now.
It's 10 hours.
Not just as a Nyahbinghi family, but as a Rastafari African leadership movement. Yes, it is my pleasure to invite my brethren, my brother, Ayavi, to address us. Please, Ras Ayavi.
First, I would like to say greetings to all my brethren and sisters on the chat, to all my brethren and sisters who have, passed on, to all those who are still here with I and I fighting for equal rights and justice. It's a greetings in the name of the Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie, name of an Empress, Empress Wajira Menem. Give thanks for the presentation, the opening ceremony, I would call it, by Ras Ibai and family, and give thanks for the presentation from Ras Frankai Francis. I would just like to point out that I approach the movement from two different angles, in the sense that as a Rastafari youth coming up, what was very evident was the persecution of Rastafari. And herb, ganja, cannabis, whatever the name, wanted to call, was the avenue through which the Babylonian system and the police force in particular used to harass and brutalize Rastafari. The other aspect was from the economic point of view, because most Rastafari brethren and sisters were living in poverty. But even from the movement's point of view, I realized that to implement certain programs or to get certain activities going, it was obvious that I have to have some form of economic foundation in order to function effectively. And as such, I remember meeting Frankai 1983 at the University of the West Indies, wherein Rastafari had the second International Rastafari Conference called RITA, Rastafari International Theocracy Assembly. And, I started to do business with Herb in Antigua. And because I realized, like I said, the importance of, developing an economic foundation, and also looking from an organizational structured point of view, because within the Nyahbinghi, I look at it that even though it was very inspirational, very spiritual, but I think it was very loose, non-organizational. And as such, I saw it fit that there had to be some form of structure, some form of organizational structure in order for I&I to function effectively. Now, going forward in 2013, backtracking like 1987, when I celebrated the centenary of Marcus Garvey. And Ras Frankai mentioned Irian, and I give thanks to Sister Ifea and the program also, because Irian was very instrumental in organizing a 7-day motorcade and a 3-day Nyahbinghi in Bath at Bath High School. I have to give thanks for Miguel, Michael Land, because it was 1987 also that I formed the EIUC, the Ethiopian International Unification Committee, which was geared towards centralizing the movement, helping to enable I to speak with one voice, both from a national, regional, and an international point of view. That's why I have to give thanks, because as a youth time play was always there, Bongo Joe and others. But it was really at Miguel's office that I used as the base for functioning within the framework of the EIUC, the Ethiopian International Unification. I recall also November, I did the first publication from RIN, which was the Rastafari International News, using it as a mouthpiece of the Ethiopian International Unification Committee, a newspaper that went globally. And again, Rasai was one of our main, I could say, our feature writers. We started out by doing the grand coronation. Happened those that we are talking about. The marriage, between I Empress and I Emperor. So it's coming very fitting because that is where that was the first publication, the grand coronation. Anyway, and I had between the EIUC and the Nyahbinghi house, which I man was a part of each, just like many of them I Bongo and so on. But so and I did this motorcade, and we were calling for the decriminalization of the herb. We're also calling for the philosophy and opinion of Marcus Mosiah Garvey to be taught in school, and the restructuring of the educational system. And went on to 1996, and I had one big ganja march in Kingston. And just that, in the following I walking in the footsteps of Peter Tosh, who was also from Westmoreland, but not really because of Peter, but seeing the need for it. And when I was about to celebrate the centenary of the victory of Ottawa, the victory of Ethiopia over Italy, and I used the occasion to do a ganja march because, again, it was the herb that the system was using to harass and brutalize Rastafari because I were not criminals, still now not criminals. So and I had that march in 1996, and I organized the next march here to celebrate in 1996 here in Westmoreland to celebrate the Earth Strong of Her Majesty. Again in 1997, I had a next herb march here celebrating the victory now of Haile Selassie, Ethiopia, over Benito Mussolini, Italy. In 2000, and I wrote an open letter to the then Prime Minister P.J. Patterson. We did that from the House of Dread Bingley here in Westmoreland, not in Kingston, but House of Dread was passed on. We did that in Grange in 2000, and we sent that letter to the press. Came out, I remember, the 15th of January 2000, and it came out signed by Ryan and Bongo Time, calling for an audience with the then Prime Minister P.J. Patterson. Unfortunately, we didn't get that audience. Delano Franklin, who was then advisor to P.J. Patterson, had one with Miguel D'Azamichi and a few others, and didn't see it necessary for the Rastafari community or the individuals acting on behalf of the community to have a meeting with P.J. Patterson. So going forward in 2013, when there was talk, because, all over in the U.S., the different states were legalizing for medical and recreational purposes. So, and I realized that when the statement was made by the then government, the PNP government, that they were about to embark on this decriminalization process, and I realized if as Rastafari and as traditional ganja farmers, and I did not organize and put ourselves together, then obviously and I would have been locked out of this so-called emerging industry which the government was about to establish. So in 2014, on the 9th of March, and I set up the first Ganja Farmers Association in Jamaica, the Westmoreland Ganja Farmers Association. I remember going to the superintendent in Sutherland to get a permit for the launch. He said to I, Rasta, remember ganja is still illegal, I said, yeah. But I said, the Ganja Farmers Association is not illegal. He said, no. He said, all right. So we did that. And then I asked of each parish to do the same thing in order that I could set up a national Ganja Farmers Association, which would enable I to have, and along with traditional grassroots ganja farmers, to have a say in the industry. Um, so in 2015, the amendment was made, and because of my agitation and activities, which was known, even in government circles, I was asked to sit on the board of the CLA, the Cannabis Licensing Authority. Funny enough, I saw wherein, and I still see, that the board was made up of mostly ministerial or ministry representatives who had little or no knowledge about ganja, whose intention was merely to represent the point of view of the various ministries and not necessarily to help to drive or to develop the industry, more so in the interest and benefit of those who have suffered. So, two questions I put to the board, and one was, how was the board going to function to enable that they are to guarantee that the majority of the money made out of this industry stays in Jamaica? And how was the board going to function to ensure that the vast majority of those who have suffered and borne the brunt of the persecution for being involved with ganja over the years, whether from planting, trafficking, smoking, whatever, how were they going to benefit? Because I remember in the 60s, if you were caught with a leaf or a seed of herb, it was mandatory. Once the judge find you guilty, it was mandatory that you go to prison for 18 months. If having one conviction, you were caught with one plant, it was mandatory that you go to prison for 5 years. I remember in the 70s when Michael Mann came about, and we had Rastafari and non-Rastafari people spending up to 10 years in prison for being involved in ganja. So, those were my concern until we pushed for the AD program. I also remember in 2016 when 4 of us from the Cannabis Licensing Authority presented to the cabinet. And funny enough, the level of ignorance that was there amongst these so-called government people is very disturbing, to say in the mildest way. I remember Tufton saying that in 2016, it was 1 year after the amendment, that there was a rise in schizophrenia from ganja smoking by 50%, which I know he was advised by Winston Delahare. They had no statistics when Delahare from the NCDA, National Council on Drug Abuse, came out about 2-3 weeks saying that there was no statistics to prove those things. Anyway, these are the things, these are the issues that as a Rastaman being on the board were confronted with, because the level of ignorance that was there among these so-called, among these government representatives. We push and we move on, and looking at the amendment, the traditional ganja industry was not taken into account. Nevertheless, there was sacramental rights being given to Rastafari. But even though there were this, and I call it so-called rights, sacramental rights given to Rastafari, it was stated that no economic activities should surround this sacramental rights, which I look at it as, totally stupidness and in contradiction of and in violation of our constitutional rights as Rastafari, even before the establishment of the so-called amendment. They look at the Christians. They go to church and they have to buy bread and wine to bring to church for their sacrament. There have a lot of Rastafari brethren and sisters who don't have the time because of their engagement in different activities that use herbs one way or the other. So therefore, I view it that I and I should have the right to plant and I herb, to move and I herb from point A to point B, and for our sacramental spaces, wherever they are, whether in Kingston, whether in Ochi, whether in Mobile, wherever these sacramental spaces are, that I and I should be able to move and I herb from our farm to these sacramental spaces for our ganja to be distributed to our brethren and sisters, and for those individuals who want to benefit from iron sacramental herb. Naturally, with a cost, even though it is said we can take contribution to I that undermine the reality of what is needed amongst iron and Rastafari, which is our economic advancement in order to pursue our aims and objectives or goals effectively. Now, unfortunately, the harassment of Rastafari, brethren and sisters, still continue at the hands of the police, in their farms, in their homes, and on the street, whether they are driving or whichever mode of transportation they are using. It's unfortunate that when I look at this day, 1st of August, and we look back at history, realize why is it that this so-called emancipation was established. And then we remember the name given, the Christmas Rebellion of 1831, led by the Honorable Sam Sharp. Realizing that this type of slavery could not continue, because even though the chains were on our ancestors' hands and feet, the minds were free. And having free mind, one would plot and develop ways and means how to free themselves from this chattel slavery. So I figure more or less that the British, so-called British Empire realized that no, a next type of slavery had to be implemented. And so it goes back to the words of Marcus Messiah Garvey, sung by Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Nothing but ourselves can free our mind. So you can ask, are we really an emancipated people? And I would say far from that. So it is therefore now, how do I and I emancipate I and I self from both mental, physical, spiritual, economic slavery? So on the 11th of July, we drafted 3 letters to be sent to, one, the Minister of National Security, asking to make sure that the police force is educated when it comes to the rights of Rastafari as it relates to herb. 2, to the Minister of Justice, Delroy Chuck, to ensure and guarantee that the rights of Rastafari are protected as it relates to ganja. And 3, to the Chief Justice, to ensure that the judges are aware of Rastafari rights as it relates to ganja. Just few months ago, there was a youth, a graduate from Monroe College. He was held with 1.5 pounds of herb in his home. He was taken to the court, locked up, brought to the court. The judge asked of him to bring a letter from the Rastafari community saying that he is Rastafari. That was set up, sent to I signed it as someone being in Westmoreland. Unfortunately, the judge said to the youth that he is only entitled to have 8 ounces of herb in his possession, in his home. Now, all of that is stupidness. Because one, the amendment showed that one is entitled to, a household is entitled to 5 plants. What if that individual or that household can grow herb in a way that enable one plant to produce 3 or 4 ounces? 5 fours would be 20 ounces, which would be 1 pound and 4 ounces. So again, the ignorance prevails within the courthouses amongst the judges, or the deliberate and continuous attitude of these judges towards Rastafari, that we have no right, and as such, we can be treated anyhow. These are things that I need to organize ourselves, mobilize ourselves, because no hands can free but our own. I remember in 2014, and I had a thing, and there was a representative from High Times that was there, an associate publisher, Rick Cusick. And from one discussion to the other, I was invited to Colorado, 2015. After we had a discussion with Mark Golding, the then Justice Minister, along with the CEO of High Times at the time, Michael Kennedy, who had since passed on, and a professor, Harvard Law professor from the university, from Harvard University, Charlie Nesson. So I was invited to this event in Denver, Colorado, being put on by High Times. Very organized, very structured conference, one that I learned a lot from the point of view of how I could go about organizing a ganja event down here. And I wanted to do that type of event for 2 main reasons. One, to export the Jamaican community and the Rastafari community in terms of this level of science and technology that was being applied to the industry internationally. And 2, to export the international community to the authenticity of Rastafari, because most of what was being seen internationally of Rastafari or about Rastafari was from a reggae music point of view. And surely reggae music and reggae musicians don't tell it all where Rastafari and the divinity of His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie, is concerned. So we had that first event in 2015, November, which I think was a very eye-opener to those who came, Rastafari and non-Rastafari. As it stands, especially where this ganja issue is concerned, I look forward that I, as Rastafari, within the Caribbean, and I hope Rastafari is still there, that I can put together a structure, because even though there is this CARICOM Reparation Commission, I don't see the CARICOM Reparation Commission functioning in the interest and benefit of and Rastafari. As Jalani rightfully pointed out, that a lot of what a lot of aspect of philosophy, for example, African Liberation Day, when I used to have marches and activities, have been taken over by government entities. the whole issue of reparation have been also taken over by government entities both here in Jamaica and the Caribbean, to the point that you have a Jamaica Reparation Commission and the CARICOM Reparation Commission, which, like I said, I don't think these individuals represent the interests of Rastafari. I remember at the opening of the Reparation Center at the University of the West Indies, and we were there about the second day, and different panels were presenting. And I remember one panel talking about developing programs to decolonizing the minds of our youth. And I asked the question, what position were these people in or are in to develop programs geared at decolonizing the minds of our youth, when their minds were not decolonized to the point that they still go to a church that paint Christ white and the devil black. So going forward and looking forward, that I and as Rastafari within the Caribbean can put forward a structure together to the point that and I will demand and force the hands of the CARICOM heads of state to accommodate the NI representatives at one of the CARICOM heads of government meeting. These are things that I have to become aggressive and forceful, because these people, as I see them, the majority of them are puppets just carrying out the orders of colonialism and white supremacists. Not much different from how it was 40, 50, or 100 years ago. So again, I call on my brethren and sisters for I to work closely as much as possible, for I to stop the slandering, maligning, and undermining of each other's character, especially when there's no proof, when there's nothing to substantiate individuals saying where it concerns our brethren and our sisters. I ask of my brethren and sisters again, stop the slandering and maligning of each other's character. Looking forward to I having this regional structure together, that I can effectively relate to I brethren and sisters on the continent, and to the heads of government and the leaders of Africa, to ensure a global repatriation, to ensure an emancipation in the true sense of the word. I give thanks, Rastafari.
Yes, give
Rastafari.
thanks, Alia.
Ashe,
Give thanks,
Ashe.
yeah, man.
Blessed
That
man.
I feel very pleased. Our government hasn't formally installed Ras Ayavi in any official position in the way that we have the ambassador at large in Antigua. And in a sense, both these Rastafari elders have given examples of levity. Ras Ayavi has demonstrated a levity that has been committed to our empowerment, our active visibility and achievement, not just nationally, but regionally. As he indicated, he has moved throughout the Caribbean and has second homes mentally among the brethren across the region. Um, both brethren have highlighted that Rastafari is regionally strong. They've not used that language. Regionally strong as a demographic and needs to be more assertive now, especially in seeking regional power. And I know a part of that regional power is the ability to move the sacrament as a part of our economy. Ras Hyovi has framed well that our economy is being denied us based on legislative framework, which we cannot accept. I know there are going to be questions and comments, and Ras Hyovi has to go in a short while. I wondered if Sister Ifia would add some balance. She also is a member of our community who has her own journey that testifies a kind of preparation that her father, Bingi Irie, has had her in consistently. She was always by his side, and I would say well developed to move forward as a balancing powerhouse in our community. Sister Ifia, I'm not sure if you're here, but I know the cap you're wearing is multiple. There's an event tomorrow that you're going to share with us. But I want to have you speak before I open up for questions. Is Sister Ifia here and able to?
Perfect love, love
Uh,
Rastafari, give thanks and Isis.
Wonderful. Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
I.
yeah, please. Sister Ifia is my article, Joseph Sistrin, at various levels.
Yeah.
I've watched her develop and grow as a queen mother priestess in our community. I often say that her absence from Jamaica has significantly affected the strength of administration within I. I'm happy that she's back and, prepared to put her shoulder to the wheel as she's always been. I wish for you to share the things that we understand are pending, and just for you to make reflections in the spirit of emancipation, which is what your intention for your event is tomorrow. Yes, my sister, welcome.
Yes, I. Perfect love, give thanks and Isis. Just to put a point of clarity, I'm introducing Rasayentan, a part of I ancient family, a Salwa Nyahbinghi Aimpel, who will be representing this aspect of I. And also Bobo Greg, a member of the Rastafari community and who has been a contributor to the works and development of Rastafari. But from a personal perspective, yes, I'm reckoning with everything that has been said. I wasn't on when Rasaibai was giving the opening, but I came on when Ras Frankai was speaking, and I resonate again in the 1983 conference that I was honored to participate in. I'm going to just read a speech of the Majesty that will help me to kind of streamline my brain, my mind. And it's from the topic, Our Past and Future. And it says, we shall remember those heroic warriors who, determined not to surrender the great charge passed on them by the Father, became sacrifices, shedding their blood and breaking their bones for freedom of the land they loved and for the honor of their emperor and their flag. The history of Ethiopia will be witness for these our warriors. Our people have earned through blood and tears the deep sacrifice gained with the restoration of a cherished and ancient independence. We must put to the best use the rich heritage of our past, for in that way and in that way alone can we live to the highest standards set by our fathers, our forefathers, and our foremothers. We hope the future generation will realize the magnitude of sacrifices that was required to accomplish all the works, so that it may preserve it as a gain. It is a sad commentary on the state of the world of the period which tolerated brutalities and the campaign of unspeakable atrocities against Ethiopia. We ask, had the world refused to tolerate the immoralities, if it had reacted with energy against those violations of international law, might we not have been spared the countless death and sacrifices? There end the speech of the Majesty as I balance up my iris. Yes, I give thanks for all the word sound that has been blocked. Kind of touching bases with the energy of the ancestors in listening to Kabu's program this morning, where she dedicated this morning in recognition of Fayana's ancestors, you know. And I'm reckoning with Bingi Irie, my father, who have set a foundation, and I hear Honorable Frankai Tafari mention Bingi Irie undeniably, and I hear also Ras Ayavi mention Bingi Irie undeniably. And so I also want to use this time to pay our condolences to Bongo Wekai, who have passed on, who were on the delegation that traveled to South Africa in 2019, I think it was, you know, and just to give a semblance of strength to his immediate family and to the Rastafari family, to which I know he has been and was committed to. Yes, the unification is crucial at this time. And like I shared on the IDOR study group first night, the resonation of the Majesty's iris is working straight across the board, you know, at the 129th year of the I Majesty's birth. And in my mind, I kind of call it the rebirth, because it's re-energizing I and I. And as I said, it draped I and to bring I and I to seemingly a central point to remember the word stone of the Majesty in creating and establishing the OAU. Unity is the accepted goal. Within that, it embodies many things, many elements, you know. And I, as the brethren mentioned, the EIUC, I remember the 1983, and the EIUC, the RCO, and in recent time, the Millennium Council, the Rastafari Millennium Council, and the amount of work that has been done. And I think the work has been done, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but just to revisit all of them, the CRO, all of that strength that I and I are given. And I'm going to become sentimental and personal through the order for me of the Nyahbinghi, because the Nyahbinghi to me have set a platform despite of this organization. And I credit that to all of I and I who probably need to understand the responsibility of leadership. And once I and I are able, because a lot of I and I would like to lead and so on, but we need probably to get some kind of training in order for I and I to monitor I and I's responsibility in a more effective and efficient way. So with no further ado, in reckoning with, yes, I am here in Jamaica, but I'm also a global Rastafari. I become a global Rastafari woman. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a community member, activist, joining in team with my fellow brethren and sisters in working in making positive changes wherever I am. I'm a member of the North Carolina Rastafari Union, a member of the Rastafari Panama Alliance as well, and an ardent birth child of the Nyahbinghi order. So I give thanks, and I would, after the question and answer, Rasalani, I think the eyes would facilitate Ras Ayentan and Bobo Greg, who will be representing, and also the event that I and I will be hosting tomorrow for Emancipation Day, the 2nd. Give thanks and Isis.
Give thanks, Sister Alfia, and thank you for providing the inspiration of His Majesty directly as applied to this moment. It was a really relevant reading that was selected. We give thanks for that and the words that you brought. just demonstrate that, I and I have been engaged and deployed in advancing this forward. Unity is important, was one of the key things. Leadership training is something that you've raised and placed on the table in front of us. And that's one of the reasons why we have these two elders with us this morning, to help to provide some inspirations. At this point, we'd love to hear from, I've not been paying enough attention to the chat. I'm afraid I've been drawn into the conversation. But if there's anyone who wishes to uh, make a comment
There
or
are
ask a question. Yes, yes,
there
Khalid.
are some student inquiries if you want my assistant to read.
Go ahead.
Have
Yeah.
First one, have there been any women who played any notable role in the Rastafari pivot towards recognizing the importance of emancipation? Two, what kind of information can be shared about the continued role works of Rastafari around liberation and emancipation going forward? And then a third, will there be any more chanting?
All right. I would want to perhaps ask Ras Ayavi to respond to the inquiry about the participation of women in the Rastafari emancipation. I mean, the fact is that women have not been highlighted in the journey as much, and we are now on a correction journey. But they've always been there. I know people like Marshanti, Baby I, and others, Mama Bubbles, are elders from a while back. But Ras Ayavi, you might want to provide some insights on that.
Yes, Farah, give thanks, And as a youth time for treading into the Nyahbinghi house, I can remember that empresses were not allowed to talk. It was really a patriarchal approach within the Nyahbinghi, which a lot of it was based upon, biblical teaching, biblical tradition, which a lot of these were also outdated. And I remember that I had to call on elders and say that if empresses cannot speak in the tabernacle, then provide somewhere for them to speak. Because looking at the structure, the government structure of Ethiopia, and the role that women, so to speak, empresses were playing, and looking at the history of Africa, and realizing that when we look at Queen Nzinga, Empress Makeda, when we look at, the great queens of Africa, the leadership role that they provided and presented, it is obvious that our sisters, our empresses, were being victimized simply because of, biblical, adhering to certain biblical teaching. So, and I push forward for those things to change to the point now that even in prayers, and I can have empresses saying prayers, feeling free to present their views as long as it's being presented in a respectful and orderly manner. So within the role, we say, a lot of Rastafari sistering, achieving a lot academically, financially, otherwise, which within the framework of the Nyahbinghi house, as it used to be, would not have been able to achieve those things. Also, from an economic point of view, a lot of the teachings within the Nyahbinghi houses and within the Nyahbinghi house restrict, undermine, and did not enable I to advance economically as I would want to, because, for example, if we were to print a book, we shouldn't sell it, we couldn't sell it. If we were to print T-shirts with His Majesty Marcus Garvey, we shouldn't sell it. We couldn't sell it. We have to give it away and so on, you know. And I remember at one big international conference in Florida, where there was a lot of letdown coming from certain I elders. Yes, and I respect I elders, and I love I elders. But it said time, just like how Her Majesty came as a youth, and as Rastafari brought about a lot of changes in the administration of Ethiopia, eradicating some of those ancient traditions. I feel that in the same way that I and I as Rastafari, not only sons, but also sons and daughters, have to ensure and guarantee that I and I sistering, and I sisters, and I empresses are given all the opportunities to become the maximum of what their potential enable them to be. And as such, at this moment, I give thanks for the ways in which I and our sisters have been advancing the works of Rastafari nationally and internationally. So with that, I say give thanks.
I'm glad I asked you to respond to that one, Ras IFB. Ras S. Jazz and I in the chat says, give thanks for being courageous enough to speak the truth. Because one of the things that you've highlighted is that our approach and treatment traditionally to the women had shot our economy in the foot as well. And this is a clear indication of the freedom that women have brought in giving I and I the progress and transformation of many kinds of approaches that balance was necessary for. It's interesting, as
With respect, Bingi, Naya.
Please, Ras Rankai, go ahead.
Yes, sorry to cut the eye, but I just wanted to underline some of what Ras Ivy was saying, and to the remembrance too of our ancient empress who has gone on to join the ancestors, Sister Ijanya Christian, Empress Ijanya Christian. And I make reference to 1983 at that historic gathering to which Empress Ifea has also just mentioned of, one of the early international aggregations of Rastafari held in Jamaica at that time. And there was a little bit of, hold forward from the elders, etc., and the Nyahbinghi house generally about the whole conference. At the time, there was a Nyahbinghi eye liberation going on, and some of us had journeyed to that eye liberation, including Sister Ijanya. And Sister Ijanya was looking to make a presentation to the Bingi Amples, to the elders there, particularly to invite them to other aspects of the conference at on the Mona campus. Some of the traditionalists, at that time had said no, that women are not supposed to be talking in the Nyahbinghi tabernacles. But it was Ras Bongo Rocky, that ancient of great love and, projection of the Rastafari and Nyahbinghi, that stood up quite clearly and said, the sistering has to be given the chance to talk. And she was, and she did. Similar, a couple of years after, at a Small Islands Developing States Conference in Barbados, at which Ras Bonajiz was at that conference, there again, the whole question of the traditionalists not wishing females and our sistering to utter was cast aside by Ras Bonajiz. And he said, no, let the sister talk. And in that sense, Sister Ijanya, as the question was asking about women who have contributed to the whole progression of I&I whole development of the Rastafari nation. Let me say too that I have to see Rastafari as a dynamic presentation, you know, moving from one position, one perspective. It might have been withdrawal from society at one time to more greater involvement in the society, etc. And to see the prognostications of our elders within the context of their upbringing and of the times too. Because, you know, the patriarchy, which we have said was an aspect of I early development, had led some to say, you know, in society at large, that Rastafari keeping down woman. But it was more something to be able to portray the divinity and, you know, the modesty of our African women, which, as we have seen, that has come full circle now in Babylon societies in the West here, particularly, of the nakedness that is being portrayed amongst the females. This is not to justify some of the ancient thinking of our elder patriarchs, but to point out the context in which it was evolved and to see what it is that they were pertaining against, and to see now how further developments have occurred in society at large pertaining to women. Still, it is very pleasing to see, as I have pointed out, that, you know, I empresses, I sistren are coming more and more into the whole aspect of administering and talking about and presenting, as Jelani was saying, that economic aspect, you know, which, you know, is such an important part of I development. Well, when we really look at it, you know, it is the existence of the African female that was able to allow African people to withstand the ravages of chattel slavery and enslavement here in the West, in the Caribbean and in the Americas. The strength of I empresses is something that I have to be very respectful of and encouraging of too. And I think the able example that has been provided for I is the example of Her Royal Highness Empress Menen Asfa. You know, and when we hear of her story and her progress in Ethiopia, you know, even during those war years, it is evident that I have to give full respect and encouragement to our empresses and our sistren in the field, you know. And so just to point out the dynamism of Rastafari evolution in terms of having certain stances at certain times, which on other reflections can be changed given the change in circumstances and in the time, as I move forward towards the establishment again of his kingdom on earth as it is in Mount Zion. Giving thanks, my brethren and sisters, giving thanks, community. Blessed love.
Give thanks, Ras Frankai, for that full intervention. I'd forgotten our beloved sister and her consistency. I see Sister Ifia's hand up. I would like to give her a chance as one of the speakers. Please go ahead, Sister Ifia.
Love Rastafari. So I remember my mother first, who has set the precedence for that strength for I to have persevered through the varying journeys within the movement, you know, because and today I'm recognizing what it had been that made some of I brethren have, you know, been so seemingly rigid towards I think it's the psychological trauma. But Mama Yanzi, my mother, have set a pathway, a space in which as all girls at the time, later on a son came, a space of protection. And so it developed a sense of resilience among myself and my sisters who were there for Bingi area, Mama Yanzi, and for ourselves as well, you know. And I reckon with that, and I take my bow to Mama Yanzi, who have stood strong through the irids of Her Majesty, the strength and majesty of His Majesty, Haile Selassie I. But I remember Sister Ijanya, and I remember the most recent and most honorable work that resonates in my iris as a Rastafari woman today, and looking forward in past time as a youth growing up and even observing Bongo Water, the way in which he administered and the way in which he seemingly had placed the I female in a space. He alone seemingly had decided to put I in a box. But at the time, it didn't upset me. I was concerned as a youth. I was always concerned about the way in which the patriarch dealt with the matriarchs in Rastafari. I can remember clearly Mama Bubbles, and as a youth, I used to see Nana Faraika as well, and she played an integral role in seemingly bringing a sense of confidence and a greater strength of identifying I and I's role, even as I and I were going through as young youth, And so I want to give recognition to Mama Bubbles' daughter Daphne, Mama Aina, Mama Miriam, and so on and so on. Mama Baby I for true. I was able to laugh with Mama Baby I was able to laugh with Bongo Rocky because we don't usually get a lot of that,
Rastafari.
We never for real. We were able to put our hands in Bongo Rocky hand and him tap into our hand, and we felt so joyful, and he didn't know how much we appreciated that. I appreciated Bongo Water because even without him knowing or probably saying it sometime, there was a sense of protection that he gave us, his countenance. And when we go out there in the school system, where they pull our thumbs and throw it on the ground every single day when we went to school, going to the Nyahbinghi and listening to Bongo Water, seemingly validating the trad through the Bible, which is what we had more prominent at the time. It protected us and it gave us a sense of assurance. And so when we went out there, we were able to still stand strong as Rastafari, even with all the pushback that they did. But I have identified it to be the trauma, and it has affected us in varying levels. I am seeing it more today, how the trauma, the systematic trauma, how it has impacted our way, the way in which we do things, and our ability to function on an objective level. And I want to reckon with Queen Mother Ijanya, who was on this profound trad to Ethiopia, the birth site of His Imperial Majesty, the Arar trad. There's a report, and as I said, we don't need to reinvent. There's a lot of work that has been done in the community, reckoning with every single aspect of it and bringing it forward. It's kind of a Sankofan of the work. And the 129 Earth Day of the Majesty is beckoning all of I and I have no choice but to come forward with all the work that has been done and put it in a central point and to extract from there the priorities of which I and I are dealing with today. So the RR Trad was a very symbolic one. It was organized by Rastafari, and Rastafari representative went at the birth site of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I in 2009. And I was honored also to be a part of that journey. And I want to reckon with the wombfulness that was involved into that process that brought it to a wholesomeness. So to the Queen Mother and the role that Her Imperial Majesty played in His Majesty's role as a statesman is to be honored and to be reckoned with from an infinite perspective. And we give thanks, and I says, yes, I.
Give thanks, Sister Ifya. That's why the balance is always so important. You've introduced some important considerations: the feeling of protection, the notion of the trauma of the community generally, as issues that are present in some of the culture and reactions and how it is we're read and received. I see we're at 11 o'clock and we have still a couple matters to deal with. There was a question I saw in the chat as to how it is women have helped. It was a question to, I think, Ras Frankai in moving from family to community to nation. I mean, it's 11 hours. I want to help to opine on that. I think the notion we now have of a global Rastafari family has been largely maintained by women, women across our community who work consistently, have been major players in organized international trods, etc. And I'm not saying that the Rastafari man is not a part of this, but there's a certain kind of due diligence that persons like Sister Ifia, Queen Mother Moses, Sister Ijania, Sister Desta, and it continues, have been central in energizing and maintaining the process as it moves along. I see there's one question, Carice Lawrence. Can we have that now, Sister Carice? You've been holding for a while. Go ahead, we're not hearing you. You're not mute, you're mute, your mic is muted.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. Greetings, are you hearing me?
We're not hearing you.
You are now hearing me. Yes, give thanks for the shares. I have two questions. Is there any, I guess, collective ISIS that usually happens within the Rastafari community on this day? Physically, I know there are people doing things online now, but like how you would have Nyahbinghi on some of these other dates, is there anything specific to this day of emancipation? That's one of the questions. The second thing is, I'm happy that we have touched on the way how traditionally the Rastafari woman, what her place and her space has been. It's good to hear about where we have been. I'm always interested to know where we are going. And there's a question there's something that I always wonder about as a sister as it relates to the woman playing the drum. I know that there are spaces like Profi's Bingi where you see it happening. You know, I'll see it happening at Rasta Village and some other very progressive spaces. I'm wondering where the traditional group of Nyahbinghi stands and where it intends to go as it relates to liberating the woman to play the drum, which is she.
All right. Give thanks, Sister Carice. Let me try and answer the first question, and then I'll throw the more provocative second question openly. I am not aware of the 1st of August being a set duty for Nyahbinghi. However, I know that there is chanting and various programmatic activities that we have conducted for decades as a way of politicizing the fact that the government take that one off of the calendar and lobbying for its reinstatement and supporting the reinstatement subsequently. I know that I don't know, and more so now, that there is anything physical happening, but if anyone does, they can correct me on that matter. Ras Frankai shared with me that he was involved in an ecumenical service in Antigua in celebration of a vigil for Emancipation Day. And, you know, those kinds of synergies that include Rastafari, I know as part of what has happened in the past. In relation to the engagement of women and the breaking of the taboos as it relates to their playing the drum, etc. Just before I open this up, again, Sister Ijania, in 2007, I think it was the Nyahbinghi international consultation, a sister who is now, I think her name is Sister who is now dead. I remember coming forward during that consultation and in a very compelling way saying, you know, some of I and I who born in Rastafari, people like Sister Ifia, have brethren coming into the movement younger than them in knowledge and levity, trying to contain them as though they are daughters to be grown. You know, they've been developed from birth in this movement, and adult men who are now juveniles are seeking to contain them. Sistrin said, often the ISIS is weak because the brethren them tired and we're there. and we can't beat the drum. Um, I remember, I think it was the brethren who had the tabernacle in Portland Cottage. I can't remember his name right now, standing up to explain why women could not play the drums. And his justification was, from him comes to Nyahbinghi, he has never seen that. And that was the end of his justification. He had not seen that as a part of the tradition. The Rastafari village and also Profi have taken different stances to that. I don't know who on the panel would want to, react to how it is the community is moving in relation to certain key rituals. The drum is one of them that has been on the agenda for a while. Is there anyone? I don't know if Ras Ayavi is here. I think he may have left as he had to. I think Ras Franca is here. He is Nyahbinghi elder in Antigua. I don't know if he wishes to suggest something on that matter. I see Ras Ayanton. The issue of women's ritual liberty in the Nyahbinghi celebration is what is being questioned. Is that a likely future where drumming is concerned? Mama Willeti, let me draw your tongue since there's no one.
Yes, I.
This matter.
I desire give thanks, blessed emancipation, I liberation, Iowa. Greetings and give thanks. I was just typing in the chat that, I who came up in the Nyahbinghi like to refer to beating drums as playing the harps, so that's how I block it. I don't really Isaiah as a daughter within Rastafari to play the harps, simply because I'm just rhythmically challenged. I would probably throw off the whole order of the rhythm. But I do believe that the power that exists within the irit of the Rastafari woman, if the theocracy reign, divine order of the Nyahbinghi was to evoke that space, bring forward the presence of the daughter playing the harps, I really believe that the word sound that I have been blocking for time immemorial to joke the Pope and shock Rome would come to fruition. Rastafari.
Okay, very clear, very clear. Okay, yes, please go ahead, Ras
Yes,
Franca.
yes, I appreciate all what the sister and them have been saying, and their feelings. Sister Walete, Sister Ifea, and those others. So just right to thank Ifea for reminding I of another stalwart empress, Farika Bahani, who is now in Washington, has kept her contacts with Rastafari throughout the world, really. When she heard of the Nyahbinghi school here in Antigua, she right away reached out her hand in terms of, expressing that cooperation in terms of developing syllabus and et cetera, in a Rastafari school environment. I, for one, know of the feelings of the ancients towards the sistren on the harps, but I think that we have to take it a little even further than just that aspect there, because there's sometimes imples, Idrin, who are on the harps, but are not yet conditioned to the whole expression of the Nyahbinghi chant. And I think that this is something that we have to be very, very, adamant about, the specificity of that Nyahbinghi chant and what it means, how it is rolled out, how the tempo that it represents, the timing, the repetitive natures. I take the question that Jalani had raised earlier about, the chants being just a reflection of some chants from traditional Christianity, etc. But I like to think that I expressions although the vertical sounds might be the same, Nyahbinghi existed even before the whole question of Western Christianity in that sense. And I think it then, as I'm saying, has to go as much as we have to consider the whole question of the sistering on the harp, to understanding the nature of the chanting, the symbols of the different types of harps that are there, the thunder, the fundi, the repeater, etc., and to see what these symbols represent in terms of a representation of the entirety of the Rastafari expression, namely, as we say, physical, mental, and spiritual, and to see, the symbolism of each of the aspects within that. So not to get away from or shy away from the whole question of sistering on the harps, but to point out that it's something that I think goes even further and deeper than just that one aspect, as important as that is. Giving thanks, Jah Rastafari be praised.
Give thanks for that, Ras. I see Ras Ivy opening his mic, opening his camera, seemingly to comment on that. And I see also Ras Sekou. Sekou, go ahead. I think you're ready. You're still muted. Yeah.
I see King Kush had his hand up and was wishing to make a presentation.
I Selassie.
Oh, okay, all right, go ahead.
Yes, give thanks and praise, and give thanks and praise to the community and to all of our sons and daughters of the Emperor. Yeah, well, it's no discrimination against right now the Empress, but Nyahbinghi, I feel as if right now I do believe, dead to all black and white oppressors. I feel like it's a churchical order, and even now in Ethiopia, which is an Asian traditional order, even right now within the church, it administers within right now that functioning. We are right now the empress of our role and the priestess of Israel, the high priest in the monastery. So it is similar to I giving reverence unto His Imperial Majesty. We know the empress of our duty, take care right now, I as the young ones, the kids, and right now administer, keep I fed and reverence, and is the voice within the chant. But right now, it is no discrimination, it's a oneness, and we just the traditional order of the church, being churchical.
Give thanks, my brother. Raseko, I know there.
Yes, sir. You hear me now? Yeah,
we are hearing you.
That's right. Give thanks. Yes, I want to give thanks for this great webinar. It's a great to hear Ras Frankai and Ras Ivy giving their strength and their informative narrative to emancipation. But I want to say that I cannot give our sisters, our women, our queen, our empresses liberation. Liberation is a natural process, that is a given process, that is naturally given to women, our sisters, our empresses. Within Rastafari, we have continued to hold up our women in different angles. There's a oxymoron, there's a contradiction in a point. In one hand, we call our sisters empress, queens, and so on. Then on the other hand, they can't play the drums. To me, that is a serious contradiction, especially that Nyahbinghi, Queen Nyahbinghi, is from where the Nyahbinghi order of things within Rastafari takes its name. And that is Nyahbinghi, the Queen Nyahbinghi in Rwanda. That spirit still exists. And if we hold on to the woman as the head of Nyahbinghi, from which we took that name, we therefore should know that when now women are asking about playing drums, playing the harps and so on, we need to look at it and examine it, because it is righteously that our women should have a greater role to play. And within time, we are doing that, because within the Irish Rastafari, we are a young nation. And when we compare Rastafari as a way of life, as a liberty, compare with Hinduism, which is over 5,000 years old, we have achieved a lot within the 90 plus years of where we could start to come from. So without further ado, I just want to say that the liberation of Rastafari women must be taken from within the concepts of Rastafari women. And we cannot give Rastafari women their liberation. The liberation must come from within them. Hail I, Haile Selassie the First, Empress Menen Aswa, all perfect balance, always. Give thanks.
Give thanks for those two last remarks, both Ras Frankai and Ras Sekou. What I hear Ras Frankai reminding us is that in seeking to adjust our rituals, we make sure that we look into these rituals, discern their science and logic, their order, and appropriately respond to that discernment. Let us rush into just changing things because of that emotional experience. I want to share a thought that was also raised at the time when this came up in a congregation. I think it was Ras Ivi that chaired the session at Scott's Pass. I think the sister is still around. She lives in the States. When coming forward, she said the drums are a feminine instrument, and that the ritual is designed around a harmony brought by a man playing on it. And then there are various different interpretations that, you know, the drum is injurious to the woman's birth process. There are a range of propositions that I've heard, and I'm not suggesting any of those wholesale as justifications. I'm merely placing them there as things that I've heard said in the context of this. I want to recognize Ras Hein, if I'm correct, who has had his hand up for a while. I'm asking for participants to keep questions and brief. We have 3 lined up now. Go ahead, Ras Hein.
Greetings, I blessed love, Rastafari. I greet the order here from South Africa, Azania. I'm about an hour away from Still Bay, which is where the order is currently planting Elder Bongo, Congo Bongo George. And it's also where the elders are currently residing here in Azania. So Mama Cherry is there. Yeah, and my comment basically, is towards give thanks for being part of this forum. Aina is highly involved here in South Africa with Rastafari dynamics. We also have established an annual event called the Adwa March, which we do annually, and it has also allowed the different Rastafari organizations in South Africa, which has scattered since, say, Bongo Watu was here 1996, 1993 to establish the Nyahbinghi order in South Africa, Azania. He was here in George. He was also in Marcus Garvey, Cape Town, and thereafter they went to Joburg, don't know the name of the area where they had established the Rastafari National Council. All in all, that being said, I want to just emphasize the revolutionary decolonial roots of this global grassroots movement, which is a counter-hegemonic movement in its sense. And as a young soul and as a young fruit that was brought up in the order of Nyahbinghi, which has quasi-Masonic elements due to our founding fathers being Prince Hall, affiliated Masons in Jamaica, and we also know we have roots in Hindu cosmology because of Leonard P. Howell and how we came to this cosmology of Rasta before the Christian and the Judeo-Christian elements. And we know that patriarchy itself is Judeo-Christian. So a lot of our patriarchy, which our elders unfortunately transferred into younger youths and then spread globally, is because of the Judeo-Christian patriarchal roots, which influenced us in a colonial society here in Africa. But in essence, indigenous, imperial, decolonial consciousness is not patriarchal. We are divine masculine, divine feminine. And once one comes to esoteric enlightenment, which Rastafari gives us through exoteric orthodoxy, you know, we won't have to tell I that they shouldn't be patriarchs. My point then, again, that I wanted to bring back to is respect to the Nyahbinghi order and the theocracy reign and the purpose of the church and the churchical order within the Rastafari movement. But what has happened to activism, decolonial activism, when we speak about repatriation, we have repatriation now in South Africa. Bongo George, Mama Cherry, these are all examples of repatriation. So when you speak of repatriation, we now have a physical pilot of repatriation. But once again, glory to the ancients and their spirits, we have these ancients came here and they departed. You know, there was no skills, there was no philanthropy being brought to Azania. Azania itself and Africa itself still being neo-colonized. We are still sitting with economic domination in Africa. So if we study the speeches of the king, if we study the ideology of the king in fullness, which speaks to the church, it speaks to government, it speaks to community development, it speaks to the academia, it speaks to commodification of international law, it speaks to the establishment of the AU, the establishment of the UN. Where is Rastafari as a global revolutionary movement sitting itself when it comes to issues that's happening in Bahrain, issues that's happening in Cuba, issues that happen in South Africa, where we see Ramaphosa still being a president in the pockets of global capital? What is Rastafari elders and ancients and also the youths doing to revive the revolutionary liberation impetus, instead of us wanting to establish eco-villages, instead of us also wanting to do tourism to attract white capital to the Caribbean, white capital, instead of us to be another sign-ups to the Smithsonian Institution and to be guinea pigs for research. What is INA ancients and elders doing on this high level, global level? Respect to Papa Robbie Shalliam and his decolonial works. I am deeply inspired by your dialectic and how you approach academia and decolonizing it. It's a great I know it's a great battle in that industry, and we all have different industries. Me, I'm on the grassroots. I'm involved with the Rastafari community, and I'm also involved with understanding that Africa and South Africa is still colonized, and all Rastas are doing is speaking about the next Nyahbinghi session. All we are doing is speaking about who we're gonna actually have to plant next.
All right.
Yeah,
Give
man.
thanks, my
So
brother.
give thanks,
We
I
feel you,
Rastafari.
and we want you to know that this is a space that is the type of engagement that we're expecting those who
Give
forward.
thanks. I've said enough. I think I've spoken my passion. I've
Give
spoken
thanks.
about a broad number of topics. I'm involved with the RUF. I'm involved with Papa Tau Tau. I'm also archiving this so I can send it unto them.
Yeah, I
You know,
you
yeah, in
to ensure that,
Azania. Give thanks. And even a moment of silence for Congo Waikai and for the ancients that was past, you know, and to carry forth that movement, you know. And I give thanks. Ja Rastafari.
Alice. So we keep that moment of silence now. Then we move forward to the next question. Appropriately, Ras Wakai recently transitioned in South Africa. We want to recognize that. Just ask that you be silent for a short while. Okay, thank you very much. And we ask our participants here, those of you who would like to continue in this platform in various different ways, to leave your contact numbers with us. I see Sister Carice has a final question before we move to Ask Ionton, who has something to share with us before we wrap up. Sister Carice, you want to make your...
Yes, give thanks. It's not a question, it's just a continuation from what I raised. Give thanks, Raseku. This is a topic that has come up on several occasions, and I am trusting that this university that we have is also a university for the presenters and the organizers. So I hope that there is some advocacy behind this, and I would really love for us to make this as a note for 2021, that the liberation of the woman through the rituals of Rastafari is deemed as very important. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and many other sisters, and it's interesting to hear the Rastafari man speak of how he feels about the woman, but yet the actions are not necessarily being put in place. And my experience with life is that for things to be integrated, they need to be experienced, there needs to be rituals, etc. And so I would just like to put it to the eyes as the organizers to have some kind of advocacy that is going to come from this, so that it can be put to the different mansions and spaces, so that these things can be addressed. Because as somebody who works with the youth a lot, if we don't address these things, it is going to cause the detriment of this tradition, which, though there are religious parts to it, what is beautiful about it is that it is not religious. And so if it becomes that, or if it chooses to be that, it is going to have adverse effects on people who know that they're free, and just want a space to be. So I just wanted to put that out, that sometimes when I hear people answer this question, I'm not getting any facts, I'm not getting any data, I'm not getting anything to say that this is currently being discussed in the community. And so I don't know how serious we are about making physical the things that we know need to shift. And so for the hope of the future, and for the hope of the physical manifestation of the woman's liberation, which, as Ras Sekou said, is not a man to give a woman. She already knows that. So my question is, the woman who is a master drummer, the woman who does want to drum, what is her space in the global community, and where do we intend to go with that? I know where we have been, I know where we are now, because I've been to Nyahbinghi, but I'm very curious as to where we intend to go, and what is the body that is discussing this, so that we can actually see shifts being made. progressively give
All
thanks.
right. Give thanks, Sister Caris. And I just want to remind you that you started out with the facts that this is already being critiqued in the community and that there are spaces where women are not constrained in this way. I think that the conversation is one that is being had. And certainly moments like these help to push us further into deeper thinking and action. So we give thanks and we note what you've requested of us. I want to, in recognition that we are at 11:30, move to ask Ras Ayenton to address us on the subject that he's here to share with us. Essentially, we are seeking to continue the unification conversation by not just engaging other partners, but making aware our audiences what is available to them as continued discussions. Ras Ayenton, I hope you're still with us. I'm asking that you open your mic and share at this time. Ras Ayenton, your mic is not open. I see you. Sister Iti, are you able to assist in this moment?
Rasayantan, unmute your mic. Unmute it. Look at that little icon down there and
I thought
that
you were
little
in
mic.
okay.
No, we're in different spaces.
Okay. Okay, where's our brother? Rasayantan? We're seeing you. Okay. And the, the technology, is a part of the teachment that is now required.
Isis,
Perfect love.
Isis, wonderful. Give thanks for apologize for the delay. Yes, beloved, give thanks for emancipation greetings to all Rastafari across the global spectrum of I&I. Give thanks for the Nyahbinghi, Rasaibai and family. I've been listening to the program very intensely, and listen to all the speakers who has contributed to this vast and great and honorable and dynamic movement of King Rastafari. Give thanks for the empresses, Sister Ifia and the rest of the empresses, Frankai, Bongo V. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. I can only say it's full time for I and I now to be recognized as a government within a government. I see all our people are ready, and it is full time for I and I to put the wheel in motion. As we embrace the 183 years of emancipation celebration, we look in the past and look to the future courageously and determine the impact that we are about to make in this year, 21st century. As you know, beloved brethren, 2030 will be the pivotal time that the movements of King Rastafari will be 100 years of age. And that 2030, that 10 years that we are now in from this year, I think it is cognizant of I and I, an imperative of I and I, global family, to really come together and collaborate all our efforts and all our training and to make this great gigantic impact, to roll away the stone, this mystery stone of Babylon, as we approach the Emancipation commemoration here in Jamaica, in St. Catherine, Spanish Town, Emancipation Square. I, who is from the Spanish Town House of the Nyahbinghi Order, with the Emancipation Committee, spearheaded by I, Rasayantan, will be having the day commemorated in Zoom. We'll, based on the protocols that we have to observe here and the pandemic that is here with us. But give thanks to Jah, technology is ahead. Beloved brethren, all I can say and add to this great discussion here, beloved, is that we move towards what I says unity in diversity. That is our emancipation theme that we will be waving our banner through. Unity in diversity. And I know and I listen, give thanks. I have listened to Frank I, know the Virgin for a very long time from 83, Sister Johnny. My respect and condolence to her family. In 1983 conference, we were so happily together, thinking about, the Rastafari movement, and our liberation, pending our repatriation. We spoke so much, and it is quite befitting here to really honor our memory in this great symposium of I and I here. Condolence again to our family. Beloved brethren, as you know, IFV has stated categorically in its deliberation, and economic empowerment is the number one order of the day. And I must put our resources together, collaborate all efforts within Rastafari spaces and community, to rise above this level of poverty that we are experiencing as a family. And whatever it takes, whether it's from the Ganja Initiative, whether it's for investing in ourselves, and investing in our banks, putting our money in our African banks, something. Let us be thrifty so that we can move the revolutionary process. Because financially strong, then we can move the process closer and closer. I give thanks for all endeavors. And I is moving strong and stronger each day. All our participants, we acknowledge and embrace all the programs that our global family have on its agenda. We must collaborate our efforts together in one aim, that we can move and roll this stone away out of our midst. All hands on board, I ask of my global family. And I leave this majestic moment by saying, we have gradually won our way back into the confidence of the God of Africa, that shall speak with one voice of thunder, that shall shake the pillars of a corrupt and unjust world. Unquote. Words of Marcus Garvey. Blessed, my beloved brethren, blessed to the empresses, as pertaining to the Nyahbinghi and the empress's participation. And I have noted, and it will be on the agenda and will be given consideration, and we will make our comments. Give thanks again, give thanks for all my beloved brethren and sistren. We have come a long way, and psychologically speaking, our emancipation from mental slavery is pending. We must rise to the occasion and become something bigger and better than before. Rastafari, give thanks.
Give
Through the
thanks.
chair.
Yes, Sister Ifya?
Yes, I just wanted to let the guys know that Ras Ayentan and Bobo Greg are supposed to be sharing the presentation. So I'm not sure if right after Ras Ayentan, if Bobo Greg would be allotted the minutes to continue on where
Yes.
Ras
All right.
Ayentan.
So
Yes,
we have about 19 minutes before noon. I don't think we should try and extend this beyond that time. We have Bobo Greg then and Priest Kailash as our final speakers. So if Bobo Greg is ready, we ask him to just block in a couple minutes, and then we move forward to the final blocking from Honorable Priest Kailash. Bobo Greg?
Yes, beloved ones, I say
Give
give
thanks.
thanks and praises to all in the name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, Rastafari. Blessed love to all presenters and greetings on this auspicious day, Emancipation 183. Commemoration going through, blessed love all on the panel going forward. I must say, I have to just mute the video just to get more power within the connection. It is very important that the significance of this liberation struggle inauguration, as it was from Emancipation Act of 1834, be recognized and to note the struggle that is still going on. Subsequent to that act, there was this apprenticeship that actually presented forced labor for 4 years before that was dismantled in 1838. Where the so-called liberation of the declaration should have been recognized. Albeit though, if we were to trace the significance of that history again, you will know that the indentured servants who came in over from India and perhaps even China later down had the contract to know that after their duration of labor, contracted labor, they would have been repatriated and returned to East India after the duration of their service. Albeit those who were not repatriated were given an alternative and were presented crown lands as a means of compensation. Now, this was never presented to the Africans throughout the diaspora who were taken and subjected to this harsh, inhumane slave condition. Fast-tracking this emancipation, forced labor that was enacted in 1834 can even be witnessed with the IMF processing, where when you look at structural adjustment program and deals that actually freeze public wages as a means of forced labor continuing in the 20th century. So the whole aspect of liberation, if we were to track that real essence of repatriation, which is the fundamental right and of restitution according to the United Nations Declaration, where we are to return to that place where we were subjected with compensation. was actually began with the role of Honorable Marcus Garvey, the prophet, when he was born 50 years after after the act was delivered to start this Pan-African mission, which Rastafari in essence took up the mantle. And for even further reference to this matter, I had posted the recent publication that the council did, Ethio-Africa Diaspora Millennium Council, as representative in April, which is also a reflective of the mission of Rastafari, taking on the mantle of emancipation as how it rightfully represents within even the very constitution and framework of the consciousness of the creed of Rastafari, which declares that prince and princesses shall tread out of this house of bondage, and we Ethiopians shall stretch forth our hands and to the Most High Emperor Haile Selassie Jah Rastafari. I must comment the role and the issue that was raised because 2001 saw the United Nations Durban Declaration, which speaks to the essence of guaranteeing reparation as a means of redress to this brutal act of slavery, in which we had this 2013 CARICOM conference, because countries, the 168 countries that signed on to the Durban Declaration, because that UN conference was done in South Africa, the Durban, South Africa, to continue that mandate, which CARICOM followed through with in 2013 under the leadership at the chairman, Prime Minister Gonzalez at that time. We were privileged to be a part of that delegation that the Honorable, who actually was our chairman, who recently passed on, Jaboni Wheeler, invited, and in that process, we had actually presented our documentation that was constructed at the forming of the council in 2007, where such documentation as claimant was presented that helped to shape the 10-point agenda, which significantly as number 2 item, repatriation, and number 3 as indigenous people's rights, which is also comes into the juxtapositioning in where our demand has to be ideally identified as to define the difference between of the repatriation movement and those who are taking on the indigenous people's rights within the process of reparation. So the significance of that, and I have to even recognize also the moderator Jalani, Ras Jalani Naya, who was commissioned to help construct the National Commission on Reparation document, I believe in 2013, and as a part of inserting our presentation that the council did in 2013 in that document. So there are situations of concern, fast tracking what needs to be done. The follow-up conference in 2014 to address the 10-point agenda was done in Antigua and Barbuda, which we also submitted through email to the secretary, our position in the 10-point agenda that needs to be addressed. So the real situation is the fact that we are the claimants of our injustice handed to us for over 400 years. And it's imperative that the claimants make our voice and our dominant force be heard. What is on the agenda now is to pressure the governments and to demand what is that form of representation that the 10-point agenda that CARICOM has endorsed is being doing for the claimants, because as of now, I can tell the item to update. There is no official report being released where that 10-point agenda was to be addressed, and where the claimants now can afford to see what the governments are there doing to represent the rights of the victims of the transatlantic slave trade for over 400 years. I know recently the Prime Minister Mosley of Barbados has revised the 10-point agenda. I believe she put on a 4-point agenda with the 10-point to help fast track it. I know here in Jamaica, there was a political vote in 2015 to deal with the matter of reparation in Parliament that gives the right for those who want, the Africans who desire to repatriate, and those African Jamaicans who are entitled for reparation. But the fact of the matter, as I said in addressing the post that I have done on the chat, is to really engage the mission of Rastafari. And I must even comment again on Sister Ifia for giving the opportunity for this presentation and even to reflect on our father's work, which is imperative because she was very instrumental in the Global Rastafari Reason in 2003 that brought the family together to start to address the significant Durban Declaration of 2001, where the matter of repatriation that we have been so agitated from day one was brought to the table, and it aided the fast tracking of the document, the first draft that was presented and constructed in 2009 and has gone forth and was presented at CARICOM and in various documents as how if one has the opportunity to look at the link that we had published in the Gleaner in facilitating a collaboration with the Center of Reparation Research here in Jamaica that was recently established. So in a matter of ongoing deliberation, in a matter of agitation and advocacy, I believe this is where the essence of the rights of the people must be continued as claimant to pressure the governments at this moment to see forth that the matter of reparation, particularly items number 2, the matter that deals with repatriation, item number 3, the matter that deals with indigenous people's rights, be recognized and be defined in its appropriate representation. So for these words, I do give thanks for the moment and really listen out. But I will close with one significance in addressing the matter of spirituality, in the matter of the subject matter, not to go in much details really, obviously for the time, but it is very important that the confrontation that the Majesty and High Emperor Haile Selassie I did at the League of Nations in 1936 onward to bring down the League of Nations when the invasion of Italy was done and the great victory, May 5th, 1941, it's very significant as the starting role as the domino effect to dismantle colonialism that began the liberation of the African countries to begin even the significant inauguration of the OAU. So blessed love and greeting. I give thanks for this moment and to present. So we'll definitely listen forward, continue. Rastafari blessings.
Honorable Priest, give thanks, Prophet Greg, for those expansive words, dealing with quite a bit. We have a few minutes left and there's still a request for eyes as I see Honorable Priest Kailash in camera and ready. I would invite him to block his sound in connection to the moment that we're in emancipation, Rastafari, imperatives, etc. from his own location. Honorable, please. Your mic is muted.
Please. Yes, give thanks for life and a mighty life giver. Definitely we give thanks for King Emmanuel Charles Edward. Give thanks for the Ethiopia Africa Black International Congress. Give thanks for the champion of human rights and justice. To give thanks for the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the mightiest prophet born from the womb of a woman. And give thanks for His Divine Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. Without the king, we have no life. Almighty life giver, and give thanks for Empress Menen, mother of creation, the most upright and upful example for all human to actually emulate. Give thanks for our chair, Honorable Jalani. Give thanks for the speakers before, Ras Frankai, Ras Ayavi. Give thanks for the Bingi session. Give thanks for all the elders who have spoken before me, and I give thanks for the opportunity to actually have a moment to express myself in my little 5 minutes. Definitely, it has been customary that when there is a natural disaster, that sometimes Red Cross go ahead and other and people fly and give Red Cross their food or give any other organization that is renowned in the world food and money and all different type of things to actually contribute towards whatever natural disaster that has been formed. And I remember in Haiti, after the earthquake, I did speak on Muta Baruka's show and thought that it would have been appropriate that Jamaica being so close to Haiti, that as our forerunners in the fight for emancipation and liberation of people of African ascendance, that we could have gone there with our drums and our yaba pots and set up tent and cook and feed the people. It wasn't something that the Rastafari community actually responded to. So personally, myself and probably one or two other people, we actually bought some food, got on a plane and actually went into Haiti and made contributions towards the people who were downtrodden, especially the younger children in the orphanages and the kindergarten schools and all these different areas. And I also was the chair of the civil response committee to the earthquake in Haiti, and up to a day like today, monies collected in St. Lucia have never been given to Haiti. So you could multiply that by all these other countries that receive materials and cash and whatever help that they could have given the earthquake ravaged country in that time, and they never did it. You know, same thing with Dominica, the Rastafari community in St. Lucia. We organized, we chartered a vessel, and we went to Dominica and took care of our own. Same thing when the earthquake when the volcano erupted in St. Vincent. You know, I give thanks for, even I spoke on one of these platforms, and we did charter a vehicle, which was a boat, and sailed across to St. Vincent and contributed over $20,000 worth of items to the people of St. Vincent, the Rastafari community that actually spread it and give it out. We even bought foods with animal products for the people who want to eat animal products. In moments like this, when we reflect upon our state in emancipation, that's not the time that we're supposed to wait on the red crosses of emancipation like the CARICOM and all these people to actually come and agitate for Rastafari. Rastafari has specific needs. Our case is unique, uncomparable to any other set of people. And I must say that we have great scholars, brilliant minds, you know, people who have actually held the highest positions in universities and governmental administrative offices and private sector jobs. You have great minds, awesome minds, legal minds. So I think that, I know that now more than ever, we have to take our affairs into our own hands, because the Rastafari, after emancipation, 1844, 1848, the Rastafari became the new, open quotation mark, slave, close quotation mark. Because of our affinity to Africa, we were the ones that our own people, our own aunties, our own uncles, our own brothers, our own sisters, actually shot and killed and burned and poisoned, just because of our affinity to Africa. So right now, when we speak of our own emancipation as a people from the spectacles of a Rastafari, we have not been emancipated from the atrocities perpetuated by our governments. Thus, it would be impossible for the European countries to even hear the call for justice from the government of Barbados or the government of Dominica or the government of St. Lucia or Jamaica, when they have not even done official inquiries and have moments of atonement whereby they seek for the forgiveness of the people that they actually slaughtered in the persons of people from the Rastafari community. So in such an occasion, whereby even the government of Antigua, when they decriminalized cannabis, thought it appropriate to honor our elder brother Ras Frankai and allow him to actually speak, which he did very eloquently in the OAU or OAS. And I give thanks that he as a man was able to actually speak with such high dignity and sat down with his back straight and speak to the people of the world. and that video was like I would say how they call that on internet. Like it went, I wouldn't say viral, but probably it went lion. It was everywhere in the world. Yet still, the government of Antigua should have been held even by the testicles even harder, whereby they should have afforded the honorable all the auspices, all the perks afforded to all ambassadors in the world, and give him his big building, if his big flag in Ethiopia, and also give him his big Land Rover vehicles and his diplomatic plates, and to drive through diplomatically as all other people have actually driven through. He tried, and he has done better than many of the prime ministers throughout the region. Yet still, we as the Rastafari community have to hold these people responsible. First, the reason why in St. Lucia, out of the rising of the gods retreat, with Brother Jelani and Ras Wayne, and we had people from the Nation of Islam and different people and young Rastafari brethren like Honorable Prophet Jama, known as Chronics, and different young black men. We decided that it should be our responsibility to document, to narrate, and to present the history that many of the young people live in the Caribbean, the 13, the 14, the 16, the 19, the 20, the 30-year-olds don't know about the Dread Act of Dominica, that people were given the right to shoot Rastafari on sight. You know, they don't know about the Mount Jimmy raid in St. Lucia, where women and children were tied in trees in the rain all night, and even children, infants actually perished because of that. They don't know that people in St. Lucia used to poison their foods, that if a Rastaman pass and drink a cola, that he might die. So many of these atrocities have to be brought forward by I&I. And we are working on, and right now, Ras Wayne is the Secretary General. I mean, he is handling all the brain works right there in St. Lucia to actually deal with bringing forward that information that many of our youths never knew into the foresight, and create a legal framework, and also narrate and create video of our glory, because everything the Rastafari said 50 years ago is what the world is actually heading to. So it's not like as if we were madmen. No, cannabis is decriminalized. Everybody's eco, everybody's alkaline, and everybody's exercising, everybody's carbon footprint. You know, everyone is actually jumping on the Rastafari bandwagon, except the Rastafari have never been officially recognized for his contributions towards our present state as a people within the Caribbean region. So this is going to culminate on the you're gonna end on the 23rd, 24th of July, from the 3rd of July to the 23rd, 24th of July, to have ceaseless Nyahbinghi. So it is okay that we do the legal framework, but it is also imperative that Rastafari, the true essence of Rastafari, the Nyahbinghi order, the 8 drum song, be brought to the forefront, whereby the world can witness and see well Rastafari is chanting for the freedom, redemption, international repatriation. And I think that, I know that we are in the position whereby we could have our own state, our own flags. Nobody's supposed to be able to govern a place like Rastafari. If we are 50 years ahead of the world, that means given 50 years unmolested, as Marcus Garvey said, we as the Rastafari, I'm not talking about all black. I know that we're here for all black people, all white people, all Chinese people, every single persons of the world. I'm talking about the Rastafari nation, which actually incorporates people of all type of lineages and all type of genetics. So as long as you are Rastafari is supposed to and has the capacity to govern themselves, right? And lead the world in science and technology. So definitely, I'm just shedding that word there on behalf of I&I people, and I know Ras Wayne can actually narrate it even better than me. I don't know if he'll come in and say anything afterwards, but definitely we have established a secretariat and we are working towards bringing these things to the fore. And we just love to invite, all arms and hands and legs and brains and all people of high intellectual capacities, to the fore, whereby we could really hold the people accountable. Because I as a younger person, I know that I'm called an elder, but I'm still a younger person than Elder Ras Frankai. I went to medical school in Antigua. I know Ras Frankai was one of the people we aspired to going to university. So at the end of the day, people like him, I would have loved that my labors would mean that a man like himself can sit up in a palace in Africa and be taken care of just because of the work that we actually fulfill. We don't have to wait when all the elders die and pass away to come and try and do anything. Now is the time. So there is a great level of urgency because we still have the living Bibles around us, the people who deserve to be treated as royalty, not by somebody else's term, but as our term, as what we define as royalty, as Rastafari. To treat these people and the people who have put their lives on the line over the years, and to honor the people whose life were actually lost over the years in our own way as Rastafari. And the only person that can do that for ourselves is I and I. So I give thanks again for the divine opportunity to be actually heard, and I pray that the Almighty will keep alive and the breath of life in many of our elders, and help them, to keep, because the man say, the dead preserve not God, So you don't have to die to go in heaven. Let us work to create that Zion, and let us work that our elders that are alive today, could actually be part of that creation, and all the wealth of knowledge could be officially recorded, that my children and my children's children would actually benefit and truly emancipate ourselves from that form of mental slavery that our Bob Marley actually sang about. So give thanks again, Honorable, and give thanks for all hearts and minds, and give thanks for the opportunity given to actually speak. Happy emancipation, and do have a blessed day, Honorable. Heart of love.
Right, Honorable Priest Kailash, a very fitting message and charge for us. As
if I may, through the chair, Ras Jalani, please, if I may. Just so important, that I had actually posted the Zoom conference link and information on the chat, on this Zoom for tomorrow's conference beginning at 2 p.m. So one can copy it and paste it to reserve that information. I can't really put forward the flyer, but the information is in the chat.
That.
Sure. Yeah, we will share that within our platform, Ras, Prophets. I'm gonna ask that I think Ras Iva is prepared to seal us up, but just to give thanks for the ones who have participated, participated. Ras Iva, we're still online.
Yeah, all right, you're up now. 12 we can leave this event, and maybe before that, to come forward to see if we can catch forward the call. So
We're sealing up though. I don't know if you're going to catch it forward. We're sealing up.
Yeah, man.
All right, we talk. I'm sorry about that. He was persisting. Wanted to catch the remaining portion of our discussion, but I certainly want to commend the speakers who have spoken this morning, beginning with Ras Frankai. We understand what it is that he represents for us. I think what Honorable Priest Kailash said about the way we are able to appreciate love our living icons example is a clear example of what he brought as life work across the Caribbean. Ras Iva likewise has dedicated himself to the movement in some very, very specific ways, and is still on the front of the battlefield, seeking to take us forward. Sister Ifia brought tremendous balance in various different ways through her own life testimony. One of those impulse among us, born into Rastafari, and she knows nothing else. Solidly, our future depends on ones like her, completely engaged. Rasa Yenton, Prophet Greg, Priest Kailash, I hope I haven't missed anyone who had been in our lineup as speakers. We appreciate love the compliment that Ras Iva and Sister Iva and generations with them have brought. We started out with the poetic words of Ras Ivai, which became a roll call for emancipation as a day of reckoning. And I think that Bingi invocation really led us on a path of insightful honoring of this day, emancipation, through our own workers, people like Sister Ijanya, people like Bingi Ire. We didn't mention ones like Ras Iration, Junior Manning, etc., Iration and Manning being two of the gender benders in terms of pushing margins for women's participation. We want to recognize and honor them as we seal up. Much food for thought and hopefully actions coming forward from this. Our conversation continues, so pay attention to the notifications that we share related to the next 9 days, 8 days of engagement in this Rastafari Jerusalem Schoolroom Summer Institute. And I invite you all here to leave your contact details if we don't have them so that we're able to communicate with you. And I'm then going to turn over to the able hands of the Ras Ivai's Sister Ibe family as they represent themselves in the Nyahbinghi order purpose. Ras Ivai, your mic may be muted. We're not hearing anything. Yeah, we're not hearing yet. Give thanks. Is that a female I see seated at the drum, Ras Ivai? I'm unclear.
You hearing me, Ras Jalani?
We're now hearing you. I was asking if that's a young female seated at the drum, or am I wrong? Is that a young woman at the drum? Yes, it seems there. We're not hearing you yet.
Isaiah?
Isaiah, we're hearing you now. We're not yet
Rastafari?
We're now hearing you.
Isaiah?
Yes, I.
Yeah, come do it now.
Yeah, man, we're hearing you. We're hearing you. We're hearing you. We're not hearing anything now.
Tell me when you're hearing me.
We're now hearing you.
Hearing?
Yes, we're now hearing you. But the sound has again. Isaiah. Yeah. Yeah.
Isaiah?
Yes, I.
Eh?
Yes, I.